Well, we'll see how many people show up today since I'm in competition with the Super Bowl. But when does I start? Like 5 o'clock? Yeah, 4:30?
It's been going on all week.
It's been going on all week, yeah. So today we're going to pick up and we're looking at the divided kingdom, or after Solomon's death. And we're going to back up a little bit and cover a little bit broader history to understand what's going on here. So to help you understand this, backing up a little bit further, we looked at Samuel, how Samuel was the last of the judges, and he anointed Saul as king, the first king. And Saul really initiated the kingdom of Israel. Primarily what we're told about from his reign, though, are his military expansions. We're not told much about his administration or economic or kingdom policies. We know primarily that he extends the kingdom, he wages battle on all four sides against the various nations against him. When David becomes king, David greatly expands the kingdom. In fact, the reason why God will not allow David to build the temple in Jerusalem is because David is a man of bloodshed. And so God says, I'm going to let your son build the kingdom. You cannot do it. But David greatly expanded the kingdom. And then under Solomon, we have the kingdom expand a little bit further. But this really becomes the golden age. He consolidates and he builds and he establishes the kingdom. And it's known as the golden age of Israel. And you can see that Israel has really expanded quite a great deal under them. Now, one of the things where this map becomes important is that the right-leaning parties in Israel, when they talk about the West Bank and various things like this, this is the map they're operating off of as far as where Israel's political boundaries should be. In other words, Jordan is gone, and a lot of other countries are disestablished, and they want to see this pushed out. And the reason why you have the Gaza Strip that's okay and why they negotiated that away is Israel never had that. That always was part of Philistines, the Philistines. And so it's okay, you can give away the Gaza Strip, but you can't give away the West Bank. And this is why all the settlements take place there. So this is one of these areas where ideas and events from the past continue to have consequences even down to today. But that's not the main point of what this lecture is about. What I want to do is look at the split of the kingdom and why the kingdom divides. And to do that, we have to back up to the end of Solomon's life. And this occurs in chapter 11. And in chapter 11 of 1 Kings, we're told that on the hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for despicable Moabite god Chemosh and for the detestable Ammonite god Milcom. He built high places for all his foreign wives so they could burn incense and make sacrifices to their gods. The Lord was angry with Solomon because he had shifted his alliance from the Lord. What Solomon does, one of the strategies that Solomon does during that time, is he marries daughters from these various kings. So he marries one from the Pharaoh of Egypt. And this is a brilliant political move, because then instead of Pharaoh coming up to wage war against you, he's coming up to see his grandkids. Okay? And so establishing these royal lines like that was a way of keeping peace, and then you don't have to maintain the army so much, and you can spend money on internal policies. This is what Solomon does. But in the process of doing that, his wives lead him not only to allow them to build altars to their foreign gods, but they also lead him to worshiping these things also. A little bit further on in the chapter, so the Lord says to Solomon, because you insist on doing these things and have not kept the covenantal rules I gave you, I surely will tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. I will not do this while you are alive. I will tear it away from your son's hand instead. But I will not tear away the entire kingdom. I will leave your son one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for the sake of my chosen city, Jerusalem. So 10 of the tribes are going to get torn from Solomon's heir as a result of this. And then we're given a little kind of foreshadowing. These verses here, 11:26, actually kind of occur, what it talks about actually occur about 10 verses later. It's kind of foreshadowing, telling you what's going to happen. It says, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, one of Solomon's servants, rebelled against the king because he was an Ephraimite. Okay, now remember this, he's from Ephraim, he's not from Judah. From Zeradah, whose mother was a widow named Zeruiah. Well, we don't need the names of the people there, but it's kind of interesting. A little bit further on, so that was 11:26. 11:29, this sets up why Jeroboam is going to rebel. It says, at that time when Jeroboam had left Jerusalem, I need to provide you with a little information on Jeroboam. Jeroboam has been appointed by Solomon to be in charge of all the forced labor of Israel. So he is the taskmaster that's going out making sure that the various tribes send their young men or young women into service for the king, to serve in the army or various roles like this. No, he is not a son. He is from Ephraim. He is not a member of Solomon's household. He is a servant. At that time, when Jeroboam had left Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah, Shilonite, met him on the road. The two of them were alone in the open country. Ahijah was wearing a brand new robe. That's kind of interesting you throw that in. But he's got this brand new robe on. And he grabbed the robe and he tears it into 12 pieces. Then he told Jeroboam, take 10 pieces, for this is what the Lord God said. So he rips up his robe, and it's like it's on the ground, and he tells Jeroboam, take 10. And he picks them up, and then he says, look, I am about to tear the kingdom from Solomon's hand, and I will give 10 tribes to you. Now imagine you are a servant for the king, in charge of forced labor, and this prophet comes up and says, I'm going to give you 10/12 of the nation. 10 of the 12 tribes I am going to give to you. This must be one of those things where you're probably going, have you got the right guy? What is going on here? We don't know what Jeroboam's response was. 11:35, I will take the kingdom from the hand of his son and give 10 tribes to you. Yeah, we're going to get to this. Yeah, we're going to get to this a little bit later on. 11:40. Now Solomon knows that he finds out kind of what the prophet has said. He finds out that Jeroboam is stirring up rebellion. He's probably lessening the forced labor. He's probably seeking alliances, stuff like that. And he might have found out what the prophet said. But in 11:40 it said, so Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam escaped to Egypt and found refuge with King Shishak of Egypt. And he stayed in Egypt until Solomon died. And you go, why is the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, giving him refuge? Well, what happened, and you have to kind of go back into chapters 10 and 11 to get this, Egypt has had a dynasty change. One dynastic reign has ended and a new one has come in. Shishak took, by a military coup, he takes Egypt and you have a new dynasty. So the Pharaoh who Solomon married the daughter of is no longer in charge. Shishak is the new power down there. Well, here you get this guy who stirred up all this trouble in Israel. He seeks refuge here, and it's kind of like, this is a pretty interesting little pawn I've got in my side of the board now. I think I'll just keep him down here, and who knows where this thing could go. So he gets refuge under Shishak in Egypt. This then brings us to the end of the chapter when Solomon dies. The rest of the events of Solomon's reign, including all of his accomplishments and its wise decisions, are recorded in the scroll called the Annals of Solomon, which we no longer have. Solomon ruled over all Israel from Jerusalem for 40 years. Then Solomon passed away and was buried in the city of his father David. His son Rehoboam replaced him as king. Now what's interesting is he slept with his fathers, or he passed away They actually changed the Hebrew there. It's Solomon slept and was buried in the city of his father David, and his son replaced him. In Kings and Chronicles, this is the standard formula for the transition from one king to the next. But in this particular case, it's really ironic because what's going to happen is the transition does not take place. And we're going to see how that takes place here in a minute. Now, chapter 12 starts off with Rehoboam traveled from Shechem, for all Israel had gathered in Shechem to make Rehoboam king. Now, I thought chapter 11 ended with Rehoboam was made king in his place. What takes place here is we need to know a little bit of history of what takes place. The first one is Shechem, where Shechem is. Shechem is up in Judah, very close to the city of Samaria, that the kings of Israel, which Jeroboam, will make their capital. So he has to travel north into Shechem, which is very close to where the tribe of Ephraim resides. And Jeroboam is from Ephraim. So he's going into his territory. Second thing is, Shechem is where Joshua gathered all the people after the battle of Jericho and Ai. This is where they reaffirmed the covenant to God. So it has a great historic place. If you're going to be made king, Shechem is a good place to do it. It has a lot of symbolism. The second thing is about Shechem is, let me see, wait a second, is during the reign of David, you have Abimelech who, let me back up a little bit further. Sorry, I'm getting my notes out of order here. During the reign of Gideon, remember when Gideon is the prophet? And he has a son named Abimelech. And Abimelech becomes this murderous, rampaging person. If a town doesn't follow his rules, he captures the town and he burns them in their fortress. And then one of the women throws a millstone out of the tower and crushes his head, and this is how he dies. Horrible person. Shechem is where Abimelech set up his headquarters. So Shechem then has this story of these sort of rebellious uprisings. And then during David's reign, you have a guy named Sheba, and he's a Benjaminite, but he is from Ephraim also, and he leads a rebellion against David's household, and he leads it from the city of Shechem. And so Shechem's got a lot of interesting political intrigue going on behind it. And when you read that he goes up to Shechem, you kind of go, oh, this is where Joshua did. Oh, this is where Abimelech had his headquarters. Oh, wait, this is where Sheba led his rebellion. So there's a lot of story going on in the background behind this whole thing. The other thing that's going on here about why Shechem is that if we go back to Saul, remember, Samuel comes up and anoints Saul king. But there's not many people following him. It's not until the Ammonite king goes and attacks the city of Jabesh-Gilead, and Saul gets all of Israel behind him. They go up and they rescue this city, which is a city in Israel, one of the 10 tribes up north. They rescue him from this horrible king, the Ammonite king. That then all of Israel goes to Gilboa and they make Saul king. So you have this kind of two-part coronation of Saul. David, when Saul dies, Judah makes David king. But remember, Saul's son, Ishbosheth, is the king of Israel, the 12 tribes. And you have this battle going on. The general Abner dies. David mourns for him. Ishbosheth dies. He's actually assassinated. David kills the people who killed them, and he mourns for Ishbosheth. And the people of Israel see that David is out not to seek revenge or impose his will upon them, but that he actually warns. He actually thinks this is a horrible thing, the divisions and stuff that are taking place. And so as a result, Israel then says, come make a covenant with us. And David says, okay, and he goes up to Samaria, very close to Shechem, and David establishes a covenant with the people of Israel. Unfortunately, we don't have the whole covenant. We don't have that document. But I think what we do have is one of the clauses of it in this chapter. And we'll look at that here. And then finally with Solomon. One of the things that's very interesting about Bathsheba, even though she was abused by David, Nathan the prophet, the guy who rebukes David for doing this, it seems like they form an alliance within the palace. And they maneuver to have Solomon anointed as king. And before David dies, he transitions the power to Solomon. But what's interesting is Solomon doesn't step up and say, I'm the king now, and you're going to all follow me. Instead, what he does is he goes up to Israel first, the 10 tribes, meets with them, establishes a covenant, and Israel declares Solomon king. Then a few layers in Chronicles, he goes down to Judah, and he meets with the elders of Judah, and they establish him as king. But in all three of these kings so far, Saul, David, and then Solomon, you have this two-part, Judah and Israel, affirming their covenant with the king.
How many years are we talking about when Solomon was anointed still? I mean, when Saul was anointed, still Saul died.
It's hard because with Saul, we don't get a direct dating. I was talking with Stephen about that, is that you really don't get dating. You have to kind of figure it from his sons' ages and things like this. But probably Saul about 25 years, David 25 to 30 years, and then we know Solomon, we get a date, 40 years. So you're probably talking 80 to 100 years. Yeah, somewhere in there depending on how you date it. So, going back to our story here in chapter 12, you get this little side note here in verse 2. When Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, this guy who the prophet met on the road, who's had to flee down to Egypt, when he heard these news, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon and been living there since. They sent for him, and Jeroboam and the whole Israelite assembly came out and spoke to Rehoboam. And it lets you know that this rebellion that Jeroboam was doing was pretty successful. In other words, if they want a negotiator, who do they go get? They go get this guy who Solomon was after. And they come out and they meet with them at Shechem, and they speak to Rehoboam and they say, your father made us work too hard. Now if you lighten the demands he made for us and don't make us work as hard, we will serve you. And I think this is one of the clauses that was in the Davidic covenant between David and the people of Israel, in that we can negotiate our terms with you, and we can pull out if we want or not. And you'll see where they exercise that kind of aspect of the clause here in a bit. He says, go away for 3 days and then return. So the people went away. And Rehoboam consulted with the older advisors who had served his father Solomon when he had been alive. Now these are the people, very same people, that probably advised Solomon on taxation and workload, the servitude rules. And so you would expect of all the people, they would say, don't do this. We have to maintain the status quo. But what do these trusted advisors for Solomon say? They said, if you will be a servant to this people today and serve them and speak good words to them, when you answer them, they will be your servants from this time forward. So he gives them 3 things. First off, be a servant to them. Second thing is, you will serve them. And then the third thing is, you're going to speak good words, you're going to speak blessings to them. In other words, what I'm going to do is going to be good for you guys. So they give him 3 things to do. But especially that last part, you speak good words. This is the same word, this good, which is in Genesis 1, and God saw that it was good, this Hebrew word tov, which includes more than just that, oh, wow, this is a good, little unit here. It means that there's something inherent, ethically, blessing-wise, very, very nice and good about this. But Rehoboam rejected their advice, and he consulted with his younger advisors who served him and with he had grown up. Now we know that Rehoboam is 41 years old at this time. And so the words of advice you're going to get from them they seem really juvenile and immature, but the thing that you need to realize is they're probably the same age as him. The other thing is they're his servants, so they've been around him for a while, probably within the royal household, because he's Solomon's son, he grows up in the palace. And then the third thing is, growing up in the palace, they are probably sons of these other foreign nations' wives that would never, concubines' children that would never inherit. And so they've got a lot of vested interest, wealth-wise, in what's going to take place here in this whole thing. The other thing I want you to notice here is the language that used. He uses this term, these people. And that immediately sets up a difference. Instead of saying, what should I say to the people, it's what should I say to these people. There's this distancing between himself and them. He's not empathizing. He's not with them in this whole thing. So they say, your father made us work hard, but now lighten our load. That's what they said. So say this to them. My little finger is thicker than your father's loins. Okay? Don't need to explain exactly what we're talking about here. Loins there is a euphemism in English. We really don't translate exactly what the word is there. But you get the idea. It's one of these things of I don't have little hands type things. Yeah. Yeah, and it's this real projection of arrogant masculinity that's coming across here. And then my father imposed heavy demands. I will make them even heavier. My father punished you with ordinary whips. I will punish you with whips that really sting or whips that have scorpions in them type idea. And then verse 12, so Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the third day, as the king said. Now notice, they're coming out there meeting with him. On what's interesting in this story is on Israel's part, there's really no malice or bad intent from the biblical author's point of view attributed to them. They go out, they meet with the king. They say, come up. They present their demand. There's no hint of insurrection in what they're asking for here. So they go up and they meet with him. And the king answered harshly and forsaking the counsel. Now this is the key point of the whole passage here, is why does Israel rebel? And it's because, A, speaking harshly, and B, forsaking counsel. These are the two things that really seem to press the issue here. He forsakes the counsel of the old men had given to him. He spoke to them according to the counsel of the younger men. My father made your yoke heavy, I will add to your yoke. He leaves out the whole bit about the little finger and the loins, luckily. So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought about by the Lord that he might fulfill his word, which the Lord spoke to Ahijah the Shilonite, to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Rehoboam answered the people harshly. And there's the key thing. He comes out and he answers harshly. Now, a friend of mine, a colleague who retired recently from Fuller, every time his name's, I know him as Bobby, okay, but his name's Robert, so Robert Clinton. But every time I think Robert, then the last name goes off tangent here. So I have to go, Robert, no, that's wrong, it's Bobby. Okay. Robert Clinton, who studied leadership and biblical leadership for some 40 years and wrote a number of books on this whole thing. One of the things that he brought out, and as I was talking to him and listening to him and reading his books, I think is really great, is that in the Bible there's kind of like two types of leadership. You could call it personal leadership and positional, or authoritarian and people-based. But one of the big things that comes across in the Bible is that when a person bases their leadership upon position, I am the king, you will do as I say, this is my edict, how dare you disagree, that type of thing, their leadership and their position always fails. People or kings on the other side who base their leadership out of a personal power base, in other words, and there's two aspects to this, personal in terms of their relationship with God and personal in terms of their relationship with the people, they succeed. So David, why does Israel make David king? Because they realized he wasn't after revenge or retribution, and he mourned the death of Ishbosheth, and he mourned the death of the General Abner. And so they really realized that David was, somebody to be trusted, and they moved forward. And so this idea of personal and positional leadership is an important one here. What Rehoboam is attempting to do is lead from his position. I am the king. Judah has installed me as king. You will do as I say. And we're going to see how that carries out through this passage, because it's not a one-time thing, but it's one of these things that echo down. It's like throwing a pebble into the pond. You get ripples that keep coming out from it. It's not a one-time event. So the people, when they hear this, that the king, refused to listen to the people answer the king, we have no portion with David, no share in the son of Jesse. And this is where I was saying they're invoking their half of the clause in the Davidic thing. In other words, it really looks like the covenant David made with them is that if we strike a deal and we have amenable terms, then we will be part of your kingdom, and you can then cause part of your tribe. In other words, we will be portioned, and we will share in or be an inheritance in the kingdom. And so they're using covenantal language here, portion and share in what they're saying. We have no share in the son of Jesse. Return to your houses, O Israel. Now look after your own dynasty, O David. In other words, you've got Judah, that's fine. Look after yourself. But we have no share. There's no portion. We're not part of this any longer. So Israel returned to their homes. Rehoboam returns back to Israel. And then Rehoboam sent Adoram out to them, who is the taskmaster over forced labor. So now we've got a new guy who's replaced Jeroboam, Adoram, who's in charge of forced labor. And remember I was saying you get these ripples from the pond coming out. So what does Rehoboam do? He sends the guy who's in charge of forced labor up to Israel. They didn't listen to me. Let's try plan B. And it could be one of these things of, if you give him the benefit of the doubt, you could say, oh, this was tried too. But if you really look at it, this is like the worst person you could send up there to make a treaty with Israel. This is the very person they hate. And so he sends him up there, and Israel stoned him to death. And what's interesting, it says King Rehoboam hurried to mount his chariot and flee to Jerusalem. In other words, Rehoboam was there with them when they killed this guy. And he has to beat a hasty retreat back to Jerusalem. So that was try number 2. In other words, speak harshly to them, they don't get it. Now we're going to send the worst negotiating position possible up there, and we'll see how that goes. And you really see Rehoboam presuming too much upon his position as king and not establishing that personal relationship with the people, speaking kindly, speaking nicely to them, listening to what they have to say, but really issuing edicts and coming out strongly. Verse 19, so all Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. And when Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over Israel. So now they've got their own king, it's Jeroboam. But there was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. And so you see this split that takes place here. Third thing, so we saw speaking harshly, sending the wrong person. Then Rehoboam tries attempt number 3. When Rehoboam arrived in Jerusalem, he summoned 180,000 skilled warriors. One of the things to realize that as king in Judah, he has got the army. Israel doesn't. So the armies that Saul, David, and Solomon built up are under Rehoboam's control. So he summons them, and they're going to go up. This is going to be a bloodbath. And they're going to go up. But God told Shemaiah, the prophet, say to the king Rehoboam, as well as the rest of the people, the Lord says, do not attack, do not make war with your brothers the Israelites. Each of you go home, for I have caused this to happen. And they obeyed the Lord and they went home as the Lord had ordered them. And so you really see that God stops this bloodshed, but you get this speaking harshly, sending the wrong ambassador, and then we're going to send the feds in. You know, we're going to really go in there and take control of these people, and it takes place. So the consequences of this, what happens? The first thing is In the north, you have the establishment of the kingdom of Israel. And it's never going to really reconcile with Judah. They'll make temporary peace treaties and work together every now and then, but they'll never have the kingdom reestablished again. In the south, we get Judah. And so when you read the Old Testament, you read Judah and Israel going back and forth. These are the two geographic or political distinctions they're talking about. In the north, in Israel, we got it at the very end of our story, that no one served the Lord. And one of the reasons for this is in the north, they realized that if the people go down to Jerusalem and worship in the temple in Jerusalem, there could be a lot of political patronage and ties that are made that way. And so what they do is they build a temple in Samaria. And so now the people can worship in Samaria rather than going to Jerusalem and breaking the distinction there. The result is that in Israel, we have a succession of 19 kings. None of them are godly. You can read the stories in Kings and Chronicles. None of them are godly. So in 722, the Assyrian Empire rises up. Remember back when we started with the story of Saul, and I told you about how in the late Bronze Age, how the Hittite and the Egyptian empires had collapsed, and they were much smaller and weaker, and this allowed kingdoms like the Philistines and the Israelites to expand. You know, when the cat's away, the mice will play type thing. Well, by 1000 AD, the cats are back. But it's no longer the Hittites. In the north, it's the Assyrians based out of Nineveh, which ISIS just tried to destroy. All these ruins from 1000 BC of this phenomenal kingdom. Assyria, by the way, Kurt, as far as I understand, Assyria had the greatest or the best military record of any kingdom in history. Their win-loss record was the best, but the reason for it is they were incredibly ruthless. Anyways, they're going to come down, and one of the things that they did is when they attacked the city, if you resisted them, not only would they decimate your city, but then they would take your people off. And then the next city that they would come to, if that city resisted, then what they would start doing is crucifying, impaling, flaying, where you skinned the person alive, right outside the city walls, so that all the people inside could hear their aunts, uncles, relatives, and stuff like that screaming as they died outside the city walls. And so you could fight if you want, but this is what's going to happen. And so a lot of times they win their battles just by sheer fear and intimidation. But in 722, the Assyrians come, they conquer Israel, and they take them off captive. They're gone. Assyria is no more. It's completely wiped out. I mean, Israel is no more. They're completely wiped out. Judah in the south, yeah, that little green stretch there, that's the Philistines. Yeah, this is why I was saying that modern Israel, if you listen to the very, very right-wing Orthodox Jews in Israel that want to reestablish Israel according to David's boundary, they don't press the Gaza Strip because it was never part of the Davidic or Solomonic. So the Palestinians can have that. That's not an issue. But the West Bank, that's a different story. Yeah. Judah in the south here is going to have a succession of 20 kings. 8 of them are going to be good. Now, some of them start out bad and become good. Others start out good and become bad. It's kind of a mixed bag, but they have 8 good kings. And as a result, their kingdom lasts a little bit longer. But at the end of it, in 506 BC, the Babylonian Empire conquers the Assyrians, and then they come down. They're actually coming down to wage war against Egypt. They don't care about Israel all that much. Israel's just a little, pass-through on the way there. But on the way through, they conquer Israel. And then in 536 BC, Darius, the Persians, are going to conquer the Babylonians, and Darius issues an edict that the Jews who are in captivity can return home. And so for 70 years they've been in captivity there. And so what we see here is the idea that these what a person says and how they act has consequences. So you see how Rehoboam takes the advice of the wrong advisors, He speaks harshly. He doesn't speak good. He doesn't listen to the people. And the kingdom splits. And then he tries, second, sending the wrong advisor. And then third, he tries sending the military in. A bloodbath will force him to occupy this whole thing. But the key thing is that Israel is split, and it will never reconcile from then on. And so from the golden age of Solomon to a split and divided kingdom is one of the tragic stories of the Old Testament.
Rehoboam and Jeroboam, does Boam mean something specific in Hebrew?
I don't know. We don't have Don's slide here. I'm not sure what the Boam, but that AM ending, Abraham, is very, very typical in the Old Testament. I don't know exactly what that. Right, Benjamin and Judah do. Levi kind of disappears because Levi is the caste of the tribes, caste of the priests, and they don't inherit a land or a territory. They're out there to serve the people. And so they just kind of disappear. Probably the Levites that are in Judah survive because they're down there with Judah. The ones that are up north, they disappear when the Assyrians come in. Okay, yeah, something about that big chunk of land there is you notice I've got the towns on there, and then if you go to the southern part of Judah, there's not much. That's the Negev desert. It's wasteland, yeah. It's not good territory. It's desert, yeah. But the one thing the Negev does have is you have mines. So they can get copper, tin, and then iron ores down there. And then this is what then allows them to build up their military prowess and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting because just recently there was a mine in the Negev which they thought that the Israelites had used slave labor to mine. And as they've been excavating, they found that no, it wasn't a slave labor camp. It was probably a military camp because these mines were so important we had to guard it militarily. This was our source of brass and tin, so we had to guard this place. And this is within the past 2 weeks that the Israeli Antiquities Authority released this study on these mines down in the Negev, and it goes back to about 1500 BC and forward from there. So even there, we're finding out more information about this period of time. I will close there, and if you want to talk or ask any questions, what? Right. Right. Yeah, 20, 25 miles a day. Yeah, so when Rehoboam gets on his chariot and flees back to Jerusalem, it lets you know that A, he has got chariots and Israel doesn't, and B, he's got technology that the Philistines had under David, but now Judah does. So they've got chariot technology. So you get these little hints dropped. No, horses would be for a king. They're too expensive.